The night before Christmas has a way of sharpening every memory, and for Mara Ellison, it cut like a blade. The streetlights outside her apartment flickered as if they were undecided about staying on, and the snow fell in a thin, apologetic veil that could not soften the ache settling in her chest. She stood in her small living room with a single stocking hung over a mantel that had once held medals instead of tinsel, listening to the quiet tick of a clock that sounded louder with every passing second. This was the first Christmas she had planned to share with someone since the war, and now the silence felt like a verdict. The message had come earlier, careful and hesitant, explaining that he would not make it, that the day would pass without him, and the words had landed heavier than any rucksack she had ever carried. She had faced mortar fire without flinching, but being stood up on Christmas by hope itself was a different kind of wound. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of people showing up when it matters most, take a moment now to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little light, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so these stories keep finding their way into the world. Mara was a veteran in the way that mattered most, not because of the uniform folded neatly in her closet, but because of the discipline that still guided her hands as she straightened the ornaments on a small artificial tree. She had learned to live alone with efficiency and grace, turning routine into refuge, but this Christmas had dared her to imagine more. She had met Daniel months earlier at a community clinic where both volunteered, their connection growing in the quiet hours between tasks, built on shared patience and an understanding of bodies that had been pushed too far. He had spoken of his 3 children with a tenderness that surprised her, triplets who had arrived like a miracle and stayed like a promise. He had walked with a crutch since an accident years ago, and she had admired the way he carried himself without bitterness. When he invited her to spend Christmas Eve together, she had said yes without overthinking it, trusting a feeling she rarely allowed herself. Now, as the clock crept past the time he was supposed to arrive, Mara felt the old instincts rise, the ones that told her to retreat, to armor herself with solitude. She brewed coffee she did not want, and sat on the edge of her couch, staring at the door as if it might open out of sheer will. The message replayed in her mind, the explanation relayed through a hurried phone call from the children, their voices layered with urgency and fear. They had said their father's crutch had broken, that he could not walk alone, that they were scared and did not know what to do. There had been no drama in their words, only the simple truth of a problem too big for 3 small hearts on a winter night. Mara's training kicked in before her doubts could catch up. She pulled on her boots and coat, the muscle memory of readiness guiding her movements. The streets were slick with ice, and the city felt hushed, as if holding its breath. She drove through neighborhoods glowing with warmth, windows bright with families gathered around tables, laughter spilling into the cold. Each passing scene pressed on her loneliness, but it also fueled her resolve. She was not headed toward absence anymore, she was moving toward need. Daniel lived in a modest house on the edge of town, the kind that wore its years with humility. When Mara arrived, the porch light was off, and snow had begun to pile against the steps. She knocked, then tried the door, finding it unlocked. Inside, the air was tense with worry. The triplets were huddled together on the couch, their faces pale and drawn, their small hands knotted in each other's sleeves. Daniel sat nearby, the broken crutch propped uselessly against the wall, his legs stiff and unmoving. He looked up with a mixture of relief and shame that Mara recognized instantly, the expression of someone who hated being a burden more than being alone. The house was cold, the furnace struggling against the night, and the tree in the corner leaned slightly, half-decorated. Mara moved through the space with quiet authority, assessing, adapting, making decisions. She checked Daniel's leg, careful and competent, then turned her attention to the children, who watched her as if she had stepped out of one of the stories they loved. She reassured them with calm actions, warming soup on the stove, wrapping a blanket around their father, making the house feel held together again. The broken crutch was more than a piece of equipment, it was a symbol of how quickly stability could fracture, and Mara understood that intimately. As the hours passed, something shifted. The fear ebbed, replaced by a cautious peace. Snow continued to fall outside, thickening the silence, and the house seemed to exhale. Mara found herself sitting on the floor, helping the triplets finish decorating the tree with ornaments that told stories of past Christmases. Each bauble was a memory, a marker of survival and joy, and Mara felt herself becoming part of that tapestry without realizing when it happened. She had not come expecting to stay, but leaving now felt unthinkable. Daniel watched her with a gratitude that went beyond words, his eyes reflecting both the pain of the present and the hope of something beginning. He had worried that his injury would scare her away, that his life was too complicated, too heavy. Mara saw in him the same fears she carried, the belief that brokenness disqualified a person from love. Sitting there, surrounded by evidence to the contrary, she felt that belief loosen its grip. Christmas morning arrived softly, the sky pale and forgiving. Mara woke on the couch with a blanket pulled up to her chin, the smell of cinnamon and coffee drifting through the house. The triplets were already awake, their excitement tempered by the quiet reverence of the day. They had arranged a small pile of gifts beneath the tree, and there was one for Mara, wrapped in paper that had been taped together unevenly. Inside was a card with drawings and a simple message of thanks, the kind that goes straight to the heart without asking permission. Mara felt tears well, unashamed, as she realized how deeply she had been seen. The day unfolded without spectacle, but with a richness that lingered. They shared a meal cobbled together from what was on hand, laughed at small mishaps, and spent hours talking about ordinary things that felt extraordinary in their simplicity. Daniel's leg improved with rest, and Mara fashioned a temporary support from spare materials until a replacement crutch could be found. The problem that had threatened to unravel everything became a story they would tell later, a reminder of how close they had come to missing this. For Mara, the greatest challenge had never been the war or the loneliness that followed. It had been allowing herself to need others again. Standing in that living room, watching the triplets play and Daniel doze peacefully, she understood that strength was not diminished by dependence. The uniform in her closet no longer felt like a relic of a closed chapter, but a foundation for the person she was still becoming. As the afternoon light slanted through the windows, Mara stepped outside onto the porch, breathing in the cold air. The neighborhood was alive with quiet joy, doors opening and closing, people carrying plates and packages to one another. She felt connected to it all in a way she had not in years. Being stood up on Christmas had led her here, to a place where she was needed and wanted, not for what she could endure, but for who she was. If this story has touched your heart, if it has reminded you that showing up can change everything, take a moment now to like this video, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe so more stories like this can find you when you need them most. The evening drew in, and with it came a sense of completion that did not require perfection. Mara knew there would be challenges ahead, conversations to have, logistics to untangle. Love, she had learned, was not a rescue mission but a partnership, built slowly on trust and presence. She did not know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, that uncertainty felt like an invitation rather than a threat. Before the day ended, take a second to comment the word hope below if this story reminded you that even broken plans can lead to beautiful beginnings. As Mara drove home later that night, the snow had stopped, leaving the world clean and reflective under the streetlights. She glanced at the passenger seat, empty now but warm with memory, and smiled. Christmas had not gone the way she planned, but it had given her something better, proof that hearts, like crutches, can break, and that with a little help, they can still carry us forward.